Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being with us on this rainy day. I'm Mary Pat Higgins. I'm the President and CEO of the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. We gather here together today to honor the victims of the genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda. In just 100 days in 1994, more than 800,000 Tutsis and moderate Hutus were murdered in Rwanda. Today, two survivors of genocide will join us to recount their experiences and remember those who perished. I would like to thank our community partners for today's program: SMU Human Rights Program, Southwest Jewish Congress, and the Texas Holocaust, Genocide, and Anti-Semitism Advisory Commission. And we are so fortunate to have the chair of the commission with us today, Kenny Goldberg. Please help me thank him for his work. I would like to extend a special thank you to Candy and Ike Brown for their support of the Candy Brown Holocaust and Human Rights Educator Series, and welcome the educators with us today participating in today's session on genocide studies. Thank you for your work with the students in our community. We are very grateful for your service. Momentarily, we will watch a 15-minute video about the genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda. Then we will observe a moment of silence. Afterwards, Emmanuel Sabagabo, president of the Rwandan American Community of Dallas-Fort Worth, will share a few remarks before introducing today's speakers. Thank you all for joining us today. We know this will be a very impactful and commemorative experience.
muzi yuko hari inyenzi ziri mu gihugu imbunda nikomeza kuba umusirikare gusa ejo ni ubundi akantu kateganyijwe muri mujyi wa Kigali inkotanyi zashize
ngira ngo abantu benshi bavuga ngo genocide ngo ni umujinya w'abantu ngo bagize kubera indege wasubira inyuma yabona yuko bidafite n'ishingiro kubera yuko hari n'ibindi bintu byinshi byari byarakozwe mbere yayo nk'ibitekerezo bipfobya, ibitekerezo birenganya, bikinagaza.
Iriya hanuka ry'indege ntabwo ari impamvu, ni imbarutso. Gusa perezida bapfuye mu bihugu bingahe ku isi barabarika. Ibihugu byapfuyemo abaperezida ni byinshi, ariko ntibigeze haba genocide.
Abanyarwanda bajya gucikamo ibice, icya mbere ni politike y'imiyoborere. Abakoloni, ababirigi bashakaga gushaka abakozi bo kubakorera akazi bitasabye yuko bashyiramo amafaranga menshi. Bagombaga rero gufata igice kimwe kigakora akazi, hakagira n'ababikoreshwa. Hanyuma rero igihe cy'ubukoloni buri mu gusa nk'aho burangira, ngo kubera ababirigi babonaga inyungu muri Kongo kandi bakumva kuzagezegeraho bazajya baca mu Rwanda, baravuze ngo b'abatutsi baduhaga raporo y'uko akazi kameze cyangwa tukabakubita nabo batagakoresheje, ntabwo bazatwemerera ko u Rwanda turukoresha, tugumya kurugira akarima dukoreramo ibyo twishakiye. Niyo mpamvu bazafata ya makosa yose bakoze muri cya gihe cy'ubutegetsi bwabo bakayatereka ku mitwe y'abatutsi, bagatangira kwigisha abahutu ngo abahutu mwe abatutsi mwabonye ko ari babi.
Mu gihe cyo kujya ku bwigenge, ubutegetsi bwarahawe abavugaga ngo ni abahutu batsikamiye bagomba kwigaranzura abatutsi. Parme Hutu ni kivuga ni Parti pour l'émancipation des Hutus. Aho kugira ngo aba ari u Rwanda ruhabwa ubwigenge hakabaho kwigaranzura kw'abahutu, u Rwanda twabaye nk'abarwibagiriwe ahantu.
Uruhare rwa Parme Hutu mu gucamo ibice Abanyarwanda, unashatse watangira kururebera mu madisikuru Perezida wa Repubulika yakundaga kuvuga. U Rwanda rwahawe ubwigenge, yavuze ijambo rirerire, ariko mu kurisoza aravuga ngo ndarangiza iri jambo ryanjye mbwira igice kimwe cy'Abanyarwanda bitwa abatutsi. Izina umututsi ntibivuze ubutegetsi no gutungwa n'imitsi y'abandi, handitsemo icyanditse mu moko yose. Mwoye gukomeza kurema agatsiko k'ubwibeshye n'uburyarya n'ubwirasi bidafite aho bishingiye. uyu perezida Kayibanda yari afite korali yitwaga abanyuramatwi, yaririmbaga turatsinze gaye turatsinze Kamarama kayitora pariti zose zifuje yahariwe parime Hutu. Igihugu s'ubwo urumva ari icy'abanyarwanda bose cyangwa igihugu Rwanda yabonye bene yo Gahutu ganza ntamaka. Abanyarwanda batangiye kwicwa 63 hapfuye abatutsi barenga 35 mu gihugu hose. Bakubwira ko Nyabarongo est devenu la charrie des cadavres. Nuvuga ngo Nyabarongo yabaye nk'akamoteri gasunika imirambo.
Iwacu mu Bufundu muri Gikongoro habaye ubwicanyi bukabije, ndetse n'itangazamakuru mpuzamahanga ryatangiye kuvuga ko ce sont des actes de génocide.
Muri sosiyete nyarwanda no kwiba amagi ntibashoboraga gupfa kuhivana, ahubwo kwica umututsi bihinduka nk'atari icyaha. Umututsi watwikiwe inzu wiciwe cyangwa watangiye gutemwa yahunga, ntabwo bavuga ko yahunze, bavuga ngo yacitse.
Muri 73 rero Kayibanda ubutegetsi bwe bwari mu marembera, imanda ye yari irimo kurangira, igisirikare kitakimwumva, amahanga atakimwumva. Igisubizo yagishakiye mu kwirukana abatutsi mu gihugu. Kuri 26 z'ukwezi kwa 1973 habaye ikiswe Mututsi mvira.
Parime hita yivuriyeho haza Habyarimana ati ubumwe n'amahoro cyahehe. Ubumwe n'amahoro yego muretse gupfa, ariko ngiye kubereka iringaniza rya hehe. Ubonye yakora iringaniza, ahubwo yakoze ivangura ryitiringaniza.
Habyarimana atangira na disikuru yo kureshya abantu, akabwira ati murica abasobukwe, murica ababyara banyu, ko mwashyingiranye murashaka iki? Abantu bakagira ngo ni iby'ukuri bimuri mu ndani y'umutima, naho arashaka kuganya abaturage ngo moko yose amukunde, tutazi ko azategura we ibirushijeho.
Leta ya Habyarimana yakomeje muri uwo murongo wo gucamo abanyarwanda ibice. Mbere na mbere mu mashuri amateka yigishwaga yabaye amateka yigisha amacakubiri, ko abatutsi baturutse muri Ethiopia, abahutu bagaturuka muri Chade.
Icyo gihe no kuvuga ko twebwe abaturage bwagombye gukora, tugomba kwikorera izo ngegera tukazitsemba.
Yo nakumenyesha ko abanyari muri Ethiopia ko tuzabanyuza muri Nyabarongo mukagerayo bwangu.
Bitwigaga turirimba amahoro umwe n'amajyambere, wagira ngo kuko byari bihari, ariko buriya jenoside yari imeze nk'umuriro w'umunyotwe worosheho ivu, kuko mu bayobozi hejuru byaravugwaga yuko hagize ikiba abatutsi bakwicwa.
Habaga raporo de la rentrée scolaire, raporo ya buri gihe, bakamenya abakozi umubare wabo w'abatutsi n'uw'abahutu, bakamenya n'abatwaba bashyiragaho ariko ari formalite, bakamenya abana. Noneho kwari ugutegura urwango, umwana agakura azi kuriya badahuje ubwoko.
Nk'urugero naguha kuri ubwo gushyirwa mu bikorwa kwiringaniza, twebwe iwacu Byumba hariya nta batutsi twiganaga nabo. Uwo twiganaga kubera twirwaga tumutuka tumuserereza tumaze kumenya ko ari umututsi, ari mwarimu bitubwiye wowe kwa kanaka iwanyu muri abatutsi, ndetse uzareba cya sokuru ukuntu kigenda gihese umugongo, mwe murabo mu muryango wo kwa Kanjogera. Uwo mwana twahereye icyo gihe tumubuza amahoro, yaza ngo musangire ku gasuru wapfunyitse, cyangwa twari dusanzwe dusangira impamba, dutangira kumuheza agezeho atwibuzemo ishuri ararita arataha.
Rero inkotanyi zarateye, kugira ngo hari kuwa mbere niba nibuka neza, itariki ya mbere y'ukwa 10 mu ijoro ry'uwa kane, mbona umujyi wose ikirere cyabaye umutuku, nyine amasasa acanamo. Noneho buracya ku itariki ya 5 batangira kugenda bafata abantu bitaga ngo ni ibyitso by'inyenzi.
Inkotanyi zimaze gutera, nk'uko bagombaga gushaka izindi ntwaro, habayeho gushakisha intwaro z'umutwe. Basaba abantu baririmbaga n'abandi bose barahamagaza bati buri munyarwanda nahimbe indirimbo yo gufasha igihugu guhangana n'umwanzi. Birakomeza kugeza kuri iye tubatsembatsembe, iye tubagandagure. Kumva indirimbo yo kwica ngo tubatsembatsembe ikwira ikava ibyumbi ikajya Icyangugu, ikava Icyangugu igataha Ikibungo, ikava Ikibungo igataha Igisenyi. Ibyabwo icyo bivuze.
Inkotanyi zikimara gutera, propagande mediatike no kuri radio y'igihugu yari ihari. inyangarwanda, imburagasani, banzi b'igihugu, ibyo byarabaye.
buriya amategeko 10 y'abahutu kuko yasohotse muri kangura ntabwo yasomwe n'abantu benshi, yaje kumenyekana mu banyarwanda kuko radiyo Rwanda itari yaba RTLM yaje 1993, radiyo Rwanda yagiye ibicishaho ikabisobanura.
itangazamakuru bisa naho ryahindutse gatoya guhera amashyaka menshi avutse, niho havutse umunyamakuru bwinshi. RTLM rero yaje ishaka kuvuga ibyo radiyo ya leta itavuga.
Kuva RTLM ni materi nawe yasomye ku Kamonyi mu gitondo. Nibyo sha bimuhaburuza.
Ndibuka hari igihe yigeze gukora eshanje kugurana porogaramu n'abantu bo kuri Muhabura, icyo gihe bari baramaze gusinya Arusha. Uwitwa Kantano cyangwa ni Noheli yashyizeho indirimbo ivuga ngo turaje tuje tujya iwacu, aratangira kuramo ngo baraje nyine, ngo n'ibizungerezi byabo, ngo ubwo abahutukazi mube mwiteguye, ngo ibitanda byanyu mubiveho, ngo bamutetere na bamutemba nshyushyu. Ndabyibuka neza rwose icyo kiganiro, navuze nurumva di indirimbo nziza arayishe, ibintu byiza baririmbaga tuje tujya iwacu arabihinduye bibi ku buryo n'uwari wabyumvise wenda wari kubikunda arabyanze. Kubera iki? Ya propagande azi ukuntu ari bubikore bya bindi byose ibyara amata agasukamo amasazi bikaba bibi.
Hari ikintu gikomeye cyakoreshejwe nubwo kidasanzwe mu banyarwanda, n'ibishushanyo caricature byarakoreshejwe cyane muri kangura kuko zashushanyaga ibintu by'urukozasoni ariko bifite ya message. Reka wenda mvuge nk'ishusho imwe yo muri 1993. Hari ishusho rero ubonaho inkotanyi n'umukuru wazo icyo gihe Paul Kagame bavuga ngo inkotanyi turatashye. Noneho uwari bashushanyije ujya kureba ugasanga umuhanda bagendaho ntabwo ari umuhanda, ni za cercueil. Bo baravugaga ngo dore ikinyenzi zizasanga.
Mu kwezi kwa mbere 1993 bagosora avuga ngo bagiye gutegura imperuka Kibirira Bigogwe ku Kibuye mu Bugesera. Abatutsi barishwe barasenyerwa, ntabwo indege yari yaguye.
Umunsi wo kwa gatanu rero niwo munsi mubi twagize mu yindi yose, kuko haje imbunda zidasanzwe, haza abantu badasanzwe, bari bafite imbwa, bafite umuriro, bafite n'ingoma. Twabonaga ibyo bintu tukarira nta muntu ukugezeho. Bamwe bananirwa no kugenda bicara hasi, baraza barabatema. Abantu barabica, umusozi wose uhinduka imirambo, imigezi yose yahindutse amaraso. Baratemye icyo gihe umuntu wese warokotse uwo munsi yarokotse azi yuko ari we wenyine warokotse.
baraza bati pawa Hutu pawa, Mututsi wize gira isoni, uwacuruje yazane, umutindi yahure pawa, ibikombe by'imisozi biti pawa, ekonziga, ukagira ngo ni wa munsi w'imperuka batubwiye.
Akaradiyo ku gutwi n'umupanga mu kundi kuboko. Akaradiyo hano ni uko interahamwe yaba imeze. Akaradiyo ku gutwi yumva yatereyemo ukuboko kujya gufasha umupanga.
Twasohotse mu kiliziya batera indirimbo ivuga ngo twaremewe kuzajya mu ijuru. Mama yarayiririmbye kandi yari umuporoso, nawe yasubiragamo. Abantu barasohoka, noneho bamaze gushira mu kiliziya abantu bose babandagaza aho mu mbuga. Hanyuma hakurikiraho ikintu cyo kuvuga ngo abagore mwicaraha, abagabo ikintu cyitwa umuhungu, umugabo umuhungu, umwana w'uruhinja w'umuhungu babashyira ukwabo, nibo batangiriyeho kwica.
Papa bamwica bamuciyemo kabiri, bakavuga ngo reka bareba ko atava amaraso ava amata, kuko bari bazi ku rugo rwacu rwari amata. Bamuciyemo kabiri bamujugunya muri uriya mugezi wa Nyabarongo.
Bari bafite ubugome utashobora kumva, bari bafite ubugome ku buryo ntago kwica byari bibahagije, bongeragaho ikintu cyo kubabaza umuntu kugira ngo apfe nabi.
Buriya jenoside ifite ukuntu iteye, navuga ngo nabi. no kuyihakana bikaza muri uwo murongo. Buriya harimo impamvu ebyiri zibitera. Imwe niyo ngiye kwigira intungane, kwigira innocent, kwigira inzirakarengane, ariko harimo n'indi yo kuvuga ngo n'umwana wanjye uzakura atazavuga ko nari umugome, ko nari mubi. Ntabwo wategura ikintu ngo ugikore bagikore ureba ngo nurangiza uvuge ngo nticyabaye. Barabizi.
Good afternoon. It's always hard to go and speak after watching the video, but we have to do it. So thank you everyone for being here today. Special thanks to the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum for hosting this event. As you remember, the 30th commemoration of the genocide against the Tutsi back home. Special thanks to my good friends, Miss Mary Pat, my good friend, and good to see you, Mr. Paul. It's okay. The whole team of the Dallas Museum, dear members, friends of Holocaust Museum, partners, friends of Rwanda, brothers and sisters of the community, dear survivors who were able to make it today, even though the weather did not cooperate with us today. But it's good to have a big number like this to come and be with us as we remember our loved ones. It's good to have a partnership with such people like you, because even though the genocide against the Tutsi happened 30 years ago, some of us, those who went through it, those who were being hunted, those who were doing the best they could to rescue and fight, always years does not count, because we always live those moments, especially this time of the year. Survivors are the backbone of Rwanda we have today, because after the genocide against Tutsi in 1994, they were the first ones again who were asked to do the unthinkable of forgiving those who just were killing them, those who were hunting them. And that was the beginning of forgiveness and the reconciliation. Other Rwandans, of course, helped, joined the cause to be able to have the country we have today is because Rwandans chose forgiveness, reconciliation, and rebuilding the country. And today it's one of the most prosperous countries we have in on a continent. Being here today, it's such an honor because we are facing again the atrocities in the neighboring countries. One of them is DRC. These guys who committed the genocide against Tutsi in 1994, they fled to DRC and they're still doing the same thing. One. Two, we are still fighting against the deniers, including in Texas. We have some of those notorious deniers, and I believe, and they have some of those who don't know about our history who support them. So we have we have to fight them. We have a moral responsibility to stand against those who try to deny the facts of the genocide against Tutsis, because they come in different shape. They use schools, they use political institutions to just manipulate what happened in 1994. But I hope that all of you live here knowing that anyone who either will call the genocide against Tutsi otherwise, or those who will be laboring or trying to twist what happened, please be the upstander, don't be the bystander. Because this has a long history, as you saw in the video. The killings, the first genocide happened in 1959, followed with other massacres in 60s, 70s, and early 90s, and to the apocalyptic time of April 1994 to July 1994, when the country fell into darkness. People could not remember the days and the night. It was just a survival mode. So it's such a pleasure to be here with you. I thank you for being here, coming to support us. It's part of our healings. And together with you, I know we will win these deniers who are still walking around. And in fact, some of them committed the genocide, they committed the act of the genocide, committed the crime, but yet they're all over the states, here in the US and Canada and elsewhere. So thank you for coming today. Thank you for being with us. We really appreciate you, and I hope to meet you guys next time. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Brad Klein. I am the Associate Director of the SMU Human Rights Program, and it is such an honor to be here today to moderate this conversation with two incredible people who we're about to meet. A few words I would say before we have a chance to talk with Yvonne and Alice. I think it's, from watching the video, it's important for us to remember that what we are going to be talking about today is difficult. And I always like to begin with a reminder of, let's just take a moment to check in with ourselves. Breathe, check in with ourselves, body, mind, and spirit. And I'm serious, even physically, let's all take a deep breath together. It's important that we don't try to hold this material at arm's length, that we allow ourselves to feel the pain. I don't think that we can truly understand the impact of the events we're going to talk about if we try to kind of keep ourselves distant from it. But that requires us to center ourselves, to be here. And I think one of the things that we can do to really honor the victims and survivors of this genocide is to be present, to be truly present here today. So if you would, check with your devices, make sure that they're on silent so you can really be here. And just check in with your body, mind, and spirit to be prepared to receive the information and, more importantly, the wisdom we're going to hear. I think another part of centering us, preparing us to be here, is to really ask the question, why are we here? And from the eloquent words we just heard spoken, I think it was said much better than I could, and I wrote it down because I thought it was so profound. We have a moral responsibility to stand against those who deny the facts. Moral responsibility. But in order to stand against those who deny the facts, we first have to know the facts, and that's part of what we're here to learn today. Genocide is defined as a crime against humanity, which means it's a crime that's so large that all humanity becomes victims in the process. And as a result, we all become responsible for making sure that never again becomes more than just words. So that's part of what we're here to do today, so I want us to keep that in mind. And finally, one last thing before we begin. A reminder that when we think about the work of human rights, that we are focused on, in part, the worst of what people can do. And we're certainly going to hear some of that today. But we don't want to forget that we're also here to celebrate the best of what people can do. The resilience, the hopefulness, the survival, which speaks to the tremendous capacity of the human spirit. And we are going to hear from two very courageous folks right now who I think demonstrate that for us. So I'm very glad to begin our conversation today with Yvonne and Alice. First of all, would you like to just introduce yourselves briefly? Tell us a little bit about yourselves as human beings. What would you want the audience to know before we jump into the stories? Yvonne, would you start us out?
Thank you. Thank you for having me today. My name is Yvonne Mugwaneza. I'm a genocide survivor, of course. We survived genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda 30 years ago. I'm a mother. I'm a social worker, medical social worker, currently working at Parkland Hospital, doing my best to help the patients that come our way.
Thank you. Alice?
Hello, everyone. Thank you guys for coming. So I didn't expect the room to be full, but we're so happy you guys are here to support us. My name is Alice Kayirangwa. Like he said, I'm a genocide survivor as well. I live here in Dallas, Texas, specifically in McKinney. I'm a mother as well. And it just happened that we're both in healthcare. So I'm in internal medicine as well. So I guess that's the path we all chose. So nice to meet you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being here to share with us today. And certainly we're not going to ask you to share anything you're not comfortable sharing. So if any of the questions or things that you want to skip or just don't feel like talking about today, please just let me know. We'd like to start the conversation with talking about life before 1994. What was life like for you? Did you face any discrimination and hatred at that time? Tell us a little bit about the context before the time of the genocide.
So for me, before genocide, genocide happened when I was 10 years old, so as any 10-year-old, so I was happy as I can be, so I had a great childhood. I didn't really experience so much discrimination as a young kid as my older relatives or my older family members, except a few times when we were in school and during the history lesson, some teachers will point out, the Tutsis, because mind you, back in the day, each student had their ethnicity on their file, on their student card. So each teacher knew who was Hutu, who was Tutsi, all that kind of stuff. So every time they would say some history lessons, and then they'll mention, you Tutsi, so they'll point it out. So that's the only time I would say that I experienced discrimination where you feel like you're different than others. But other than that, I was young, I was 10 years old. So probably I experienced that, but I didn't, pay attention to it. But my family members, my uncles, my grandpa, my aunties, they experienced the worst. Like Emmanuel was saying, everything started in 1959, where they experienced all the killing. Some of them left the country. They flew into exile, our neighbor country like Burundi and Congo. So they experienced the worst than I did. But for me personally, before genocide, I don't recall much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I was a little bit older than her, which means for me, life was as normal as it can be until 1990, when the RPF started trying to come back to Rwanda. So the war began 1990 in October, and then I had both my uncle being, jailed because they were called spies, Ibyito. And that's when things started to be a little bit different in my family, to understand that being Tutsi is not as normal as maybe I thought it was. Because up until then, the only thing that just get me irritated or frustrated was the time that I would be asked to stand up in class. That would be at the beginning of every term, because we had the 3 terms, unlike here, 2 semesters, we had the 3 terms. So at the beginning of every term, they'll ask you to stand up. There'll be like girls Tutsi on one side, the girls Hutu on the other side. So if you had like 50 kids in a classroom, there were never ever a time that I had been in a classroom where Tutsis, both boys and girls, were more than 5 kids out of 50. So to stand in a corner where you're like the 2 of you or 3 of you against maybe 25 or 30 girls on the other side, that was a little bit kind of like, it made me feel like I'm not normal or something is wrong with us. But again, I will leave it there until 1990, when many family members were jailed, and some of them fired from work, and I was only 9-10 years old. So that's when I started to understand that something was wrong. And not only that, also friends and in the neighborhood, they started to behave in a way that would be, I'll say, they'll be meeting secretively, along with my mother, and that's when I started to see that something was not okay. And another thing I think that I can remember is because at that time I didn't live with my father. Then understanding all the conversation in my household where they're talking about how to behave, how to be, careful, vigilant. Then I looked at my mom and like, is my father also a Tutsi? Because I felt like, okay, something's wrong with my mom's family. Maybe at that time I felt like if my father was not a Tutsi, then I would move, go live with my father where he was. And my mother looked at me and was like, yes, he is. So at that point I was like, okay, we're doomed. But it is what it is. So that's something I feel like I can share more than what she said. But other than that, before 1990, life was as normal as it can be for Tutsis.
Thank you. And I can hear the echoes in both of your stories. Thank you for sharing that context of, genocide never happens in a vacuum, that we can start to see some of the ways that othering begins to happen, the stages of genocide, the stage being set for what was to come, even as some of it seemed or was being normalized. Maybe it didn't feel quite so normal in the moment, but there was a sense that this is just how society works. And we can see the way that led to what it led to, and that's where we're going to be going next. So this is, obviously a difficult part of the conversation. We certainly are grateful for whatever you are comfortable sharing, but we want to talk about, to the extent you're willing, your personal experiences during the genocide. Can you tell us what you experienced, what it was like for those who have little exposure? What do we need to understand about the facts of this situation so that we can help to make sure it doesn't happen again.
So I will start. So the genocide happened in 1994, and during the April, like it started on the 7th. So as kids, it was during the Easter break. So in our home, every Easter, it was our tradition to go visit, spend the break at our godparents. So it was me and my brother. He was 2 years older than me. And he went to Butare. We lived in Kigali. He went to Butare to be with his godfather. And I went to Remera, near where we lived, to see, to stay with my godmother. But little did I know that that would be the last time, we'll see each other. Because then the genocide happened. We really didn't know when it started, because I remember on the night of the April 6th, we started, hearing the somber music on the radios. And then and my godmother told us that the president has been killed, Habyarimana, the president at that time. But as kids, we didn't know what was about to happen. So, but you could see in their faces that they knew something that we didn't know. They knew that there was something that they were not telling us because we were kids. They were trying to protect us. But and then on the 7th, that's when the mass killing started. So everywhere they start killing, and they told us to stay inside the house, don't go outside, because it was not safe for us. And then I was like, I need to go back. I need to go be with my mom. They were like, no, it's not safe. You have to stay here. So, and then I asked my godmother, so I know they're killing us because we were Tutsis. Are you Tutsi? So I was asking, are you Tutsi? She's like, yes, I am. But her husband was Hutu, who was a moderate Hutu. But her brother-in-law was part of the militia, the Interahamwe, who was the perpetrator who were killing people. So because I remember seeing him one time coming home with the machetes, with stain of blood dripping, but I didn't understand. I was like, I know this guy. There's no way he'll be killing people. But in my 10-year-old mind, I did not even think that he will kill me, because I was like, he knows me since I was a kid. There's no way he will kill me. So that's how some of us who are at that age, our innocent kind of like protect us, as seeing these people as evil who will kill us. But I mean, the reality hit pretty quick. So our innocence just, we had to grow up fast because of what we were seeing. Anyway, so we stayed there for a little bit, and then they told us that it wasn't safe to stay there. We have to leave. So we left. Mind you, I have not seen my mom, have not seen my brother, so we're just going, with the flow. We were hoping that you survive. So we left Remera. We went somewhere, Kanombe, where was a military camp there, to my godmother's family in-laws. So that's where they're staying. So we stayed there. They left us there. Then my godmother was like, hey, I'll be back to pick you up in a few weeks or a few days. They never came back. So we stayed with that family. And then eventually that Kanombe was not safe because of the military camp. So they were like, we need to leave. So they were from Ruhengeri, which is the northern part of the Rwanda. So they wanted to leave, but they wanted to leave with the whole family. Mind you, I was at my godmother's house. Now we left, we're in Kanombe. My godmother left me, so I'm with these people, strangers that I don't know. Now they want to leave. So when they want to leave, they were like, we can't take you anywhere. I'm like, why not? I'm 10, so I didn't even think. They were like, no, we can't even pass any roadblock. They will kill you. So we don't want your blood on our hands, so we'll leave you here. So you have to figure it out. So you guys have kids. I mean, I have a daughter. She's 16 right now. I remember 6 years ago when she was 10, I could not even leave her, at the house by herself, So, but now you're 10 years old. You left there to figure it out, So I didn't know what to do, so I was pretty much on the street, waiting for somebody to say, hey, let me take you home or something, just waiting for the, Good Samaritan. And then these two guys passed by. They were in Interahamwe because they were coming, from killing. You can see they had machetes and they had different uniform. They were dressed in a certain way. So one of them asked, "What are you doing here?" I'm like, "My family left me." And he was like, "Are you Tutsi?" I'm like, no, I'm not Tutsi. And then, so at that time, like I said, you have learned, the reality that, you have to lie. You can't say that you're Tutsi. Whatever you have to do to survive. And then, but thank God, one of the guys, there were two brothers. One of the guys recognized me because he used to come to visit that family that I was staying with. He was like, "Oh, I know you, kid. What are you doing here?" I'm like, "My family left me." "How?" I'm like, I was outside and then they left. I didn't tell him the whole truth that they didn't want to take me because I was going to be killed. I was like, "I don't know. They just, they just left me." I was like, "Okay, let's go." In my mind, at that time, I was not even afraid that they will kill me. I was more afraid of staying on the street until the night. I was like, "Okay, let's go." So I went with them. So strangers from strangers to strangers, just hoping to survive. I stayed with them, with their family for a little bit, and then they'll be like, "Are you sure you're not Tutsi?" Then they used to feed me a lot like spicy food. They were like, "I know Tutsis don't like spices." I don't know if that's true, but since then I've developed like stomach ulcers, from eating all that spices. I was like, but because I wanted to survive, I was like, "Oh, no, I'm not Tutsi. I will eat that spicy. I'll be crying on the side, but I'm like, I'm not gonna, say that I'm Tutsi." But honestly, that was God just protecting me because not everybody got that chance where they ask you if you're Tutsi or not. It wasn't my time. And then after a while, because these people were going to kill, they were in Interahamwe, they'll go kill and then come back. And then, so it wasn't safe to be at that, military camp because the RPF military had already starting to, come closer, almost like took over the country. So there was a lot of kind of a chaos, like shooting back and forth. So, and these people that I was staying with, because they were in Interahamwe, they was afraid of RPF, they fled, so they ran away. And then they were like, "No, we can't take you with us." Yet again, I'm left by myself here. So, and I stayed with other women and kids, and the RPF found us, and they were like, "Okay, go find a place to live, go find the house you stay in." So now I'm on the 5th or 6th strangers that I don't know. But at that point, it's like I don't even care as long as I live to see another day. We stayed with these ladies, and then eventually they were like, "Hey, this is not safe. You guys have to leave this area because it's a military camp. You have to go a bit further." So we went to a place called Indera. We went there, we stayed in the church for a few days, and then we found a house with multiple families. So around that time, you find like a big house, normal house here in Texas, like the same house, and then it would be like one room, it would be one family, in the living room, another family, like a 5-6 family in one house. So and I was staying with this woman, and then, so I was sleeping on this little mat with the door usually, they were this high, and with the wind coming. So, and I developed a really, really severe malaria. I almost died from malaria, actually, I survived the genocide, but I almost, got killed died from malaria. So, and this woman would not, help me or, just help me at all. And one time, this girl called Louise passed by. She was like, "Are you sick?" I'm like, "Yes, I'm sick." She's like, "Hey, my mom is sick too," but she goes across the street. There is this area where the RPF nurses are treating people who are wounded. So maybe you can go with her. I'm like, "Okay." So I went with her. I started going with her, and they gave me the chloroquine, hydrochloroquine for malaria, and I started getting better. So she helped me to move out from the living room to their room. So that's like moving out from another house. So I started, staying with them. They nourished me back to life. And around that time, the genocide was kind of like starting to, it was almost over. So then they were like, "Okay, it's time for you guys to start going back back to your, houses. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know if my mom was still alive. I didn't know if my brother was still alive. So I stayed with that family. So they went to Masaka, which is a little bit outside of Kigali. So I went to stay with them. But eventually we went back to Remera where we used to live, and the people who survived there, that's when they told me that my mom died. And I found out that my brother never even made it back. So he was killed as well back then, back in Butare. But because I looked like my mom, like it was like a copy paste. So everybody who knew her, every time they would see me, they're like, "Oh, are you Alice? Or Alice, what Teresa?" My mom's name was Teresa. So I'm like, yeah. And then they recognized me, and they knew that they were my family who came. Some of them who exiled from the Burundi and Congo, so they came back in 1995, 96. And so they recognized me. They're like, "Oh, there's your family. One of your aunties lives there." So that's how I found my family. And then the rest is history. I think that's all I can say for right now.
Thank you for sharing. I'm so sorry for your losses. Yvonne?
Well, I'm glad you're here. So for me, I was 14 years old, and like she said, we were just, it's a break. But for me, I lived in Butare, and my mom, I was her only child. So at the time she was sick, and 3 weeks before the Easter, she had to be brought to Kigali to get treatment because she had breast cancer. But at the time, they had to drain. She had water developing in her lungs, and they had to develop it because I think she had at that time she had also TB, and so they had to treat TB and drain the water in her lungs before they can focus on breast cancer. Even at the time, they had suggested that she goes to Kenya, but she couldn't because she was too weak. So she was brought to Kigali to be treated. Now, when the break started, I had to come to Kigali to see her. And I remember was my aunt. My aunt was a widow at the time, but her deceased husband was a Hutu and renowned in my hometown. His name was Rugiramande. And I was there, and I remember the conversation at the dining table, wondering how I'm gonna cross Nyabarongo roadblock. Because they're like, unless we take her, but if we don't take her, we need to find a way she gets there safe, because if we don't, they're gonna get her out of the bus and they're gonna kill her. She's not gonna make it. This is because for Rwandans who are here, they remember how the days leading to the genocide, the Kigali was not safe. There were killings, left and right. There was safety, and Kigali was not safe for that matter. So even traveling from Butare to Kigali was not so safe. So they had to find me an ID, student ID with one of my cousin's name, just with my picture. And they gave me to truck driver to take me. So I didn't ride the bus. I went with the truck driver, and he said that I was his son. I was his daughter. But when we got to the roadblock on Nyabarongo kuri Ruriba, for those who here remember that, they asked him a lot of questions, trying to understand how I am his daughter when we had no resemblance whatsoever. Yeah, he was a Hutu, you could tell, and I was not. And when I was young, I was very skinny. And I think that was apparently one of morphologic criteria for Tutsis to be recognized. And he was able to explain himself, and we got away with it. We were able to pass. So I got my mother on Friday. She had been discharged from hospital 2 days prior, so I got there. She was home. She had 3 sisters living in Nyamirambo, one in Mumena, then the other one in just under the below the stadium of regional. Then the other one living in Nyakabanda. So they were not far from each other, walking distance. So she was at Mumena, but the house was small for me to be there. So I would be living with the youngest aunt in Nyakabanda, but I'll always go, for those 2 days, 3 days, spend the day with my mom. She was recovering. She looked healthy, and my aunts, they were really happy that now they are going to focus on her breast cancer. But that Sunday, it was Easter, so we had like family gathering. Everybody was in one place. And they were listening to Muhabura radio, playing those music, dancing. It was really a good moment. But one thing I should mention is every time that we had to listen to Radio Muhabura, we'll have to close windows and make sure the curtains are closed so that nobody can tell that we are listening to that, because that will also cause problems for the family. But the Easter was good. But on Tuesday, when the plane crashed, I was, of course, at my Aunt Josiane in Nyakabanda. And for those who were in Kigali, you remember around 8:30, the power went off. So we had to go get candles. And in the boutique, like, local or neighborhood store, when we got there were men at the bar. They were drinking. That was a normal thing for people. But they were talking. The conversation I heard was around sharpening their machetes. And they were talking about being ready, that it's time. That was, again, a conversation that would not startle you, that would just scare you, because that was conversation normal around. But when I went back home, I told my aunt, I'm like, hey, there were men in there that were talking about sharpening their machetes. My aunt was like, well, they don't have anything better to do. That's all they do. Like 20 minutes later, my uncle came. You could tell that he was scared. I couldn't know what was scaring him, because at that point, I didn't know that the plane crashed. My aunt had 2 kids. She had one, the older child was 3 years old, the youngest was 4 months old. So we were home, playing with children. As soon as he got in, he called her in the room. They were talking, then they came back, we had dinner, then we went to bed. Going to bed, I didn't know what happened. But around 5 in the morning, they came to my room, they woke me up, and they both sat like on my sides. So like, I'm not awake yet. And they're like, hey, listen, President Habyarimana is dead. And now we are going to be killed. I was like, oh, okay. So can I go back home? That was my first thing, because I was like, this is not my home, so if I go back home, maybe things will be fine. My aunt was like, no, you can't. You can't go, you can't even leave, so we're gonna have to stay together. I'm like, okay. So what do? They're like, we're gonna stay here. Stay in your room, don't go outside. But the house we lived in, they had like those kind of like shortcuts in the neighborhood that would pass by. The neighbors were passing by, and they were kind of like having a conversations around the whole radio broadcasting, conversation about the plane, crashing, the Tutsi, mainly RPF killing the president, and now the Tutsi have to pay the price. So I'm hearing people from my room. I'm not even outside, but we had to keep the curtains completely, closed. So we stayed in the house all that day, and on Friday, that's when my uncle came. He was like, we're gonna move your aunt and your cousins. So we took them to a place. It was the household. The husband was a Hutu, married to a Tutsi lady. We knew them, and we took my aunt and my cousins. They were like, oh, Yvonne, you cannot stay here. You're gonna go back home. So they hid my aunt and my cousins in the outside storage for charcoal. So they were behind of the bags of the charcoal. So I went back home with my uncle, and he was like, okay, I'm leaving. You're gonna lock the door and make sure that you don't open until I knock 3 times on your window. If I don't knock 3 times, don't open the curtain and don't open the door. We had the 2 housekeepers, the young lady for the children, and the boy to cook and everything. So the boy, he stayed outside, but the young lady stayed inside with us. That day, my uncle asked her to stay outside because there were 2 quarters outside. So he asked her to stay in a separate room from the boy. They were both Hutus. and I think my uncle was scared that they might do something to me because he was not going to stay in the house. What I didn't know at the time, it's because they were hunting him, they were looking for him. So he decided to stay outside of the house, and that's why he wanted me to lock the house. I did lock the house that night, and he came back Saturday morning. He came, he knocked 3 times, and he called my name. So that's when I opened for him. He was like, okay, right now, go join your aunt because I need to leave. I cannot stay here. Okay? So I just, walked to where we left my aunt. When I got there, it was Saturday morning, around 9 a.m.-ish. They didn't even let me pass the gate. They said, the storage is full. There is no place for you. The lady of the house, she knew my other aunt who lived not far from there. She was like, hey, Yvonne, we can't have you in here. It's full. And my aunt, she was in the doorway begging for them to let me in. They're like, no, she can't come. So the main house is like here. The storage was all the way up. And she was begging, really asking for them. They were like, no, we can't. And we cannot allow her to come in because they have already seen her. Meaning in here, the militias, the neighborhood, they have already seen me. I was like, okay. So I didn't cross the gate, I walked. Now, the area where we hid my aunt, it was the neighborhood not far from Gisimba Orphanage. For those who know any history about Gisimba Orphanage, that was a safe haven for people. And there were many people who were able to survive from that area, from that orphanage. So I was coming up to the road that passes in front of Gisimba Orphanage, and there were trucks, soldiers' trucks passing by, and they would be shooting randomly. They didn't have to look at people; they were just shooting. And they were shooting, and they shot a man who was standing on the street. And he fell on me. So people came running and to get him, to see him, to help him, and I was beneath him. So when people saw me, they were like, okay, are you okay? Is everything okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. But again, I'm gonna say that my luck in all that is I was not from that area. Nobody knew me, so nobody could place me. And nobody really paid so much attention in that moment. Nobody paid so much attention on me, except one boy who was with his father. Then they were sharpening their machetes on the stone in front of the house. He started to look at me and he was like, hey, come here. When he asked me twice, I was staring at him, not responding, not moving, just, kind of like frozen. And the father was like, do you know her? He was like, no, but she looks like a Tutsi, so I want her to come over here. The father was like, why are you bothering her? Leave her alone, let her be. And that's when everybody cleared as they're taking that guy away, and I just, crossed the street. The first thing I saw that day that was really scary is to see a person that had killed. They killed that person and they attached him on the pillars of a building that was former sector, Bureau de Sector, of Nyakavanda. So they attached him like by the legs and arms. So I'm looking at that, but also on the side of the road, there were dead people already bleeding. So as I'm walking, I'm just, jumping over dead bodies and trying not to step, in blood. I eventually was able to get to my aunt. When my aunt saw me at the gate, they were like, what are you doing here? How did you get here? Where is Aunt Josiane? Where is everybody? And they were asking all those questions before I can even get in through the gate. They opened, I got in, and I explained everything. They're like, okay, so you're gonna be here, you stay with us. I was there from Saturday. I stayed with them, and we had the doorman, we called them Wazam. So he was there. He will come as, to work as usual in the evening and leave in the morning. So that day he came, and they came to ask my uncle to take the watch on the roadblock because we had a roadblock in front of the house. He was like, I'm not going anywhere. And he asked him, the doorman, to go and be the one, take the watch. But on Monday, we had people come in. I didn't know them, but my cousins, they knew everybody, so they knew them. It was a group of men with one soldier. He was wearing 3 grenades on his belt. He had, the soldier's knife, like we call them bayonet in French. I don't know the name in English. And he had also a pistol on the other hand. They came in with them. Basically, the civilian who was with him, his job was to count women in the household, because apparently they were supposed to gather us and do whatever they need to do with us before they kill us. That was the plan. So they were coming to count the women in my aunt's household, and they saw me, but they didn't know me. So he was like, "Who are you?" Because when they walked in, we were standing outside in the garden. He was like, "Who are you?" I looked at him, and then I looked at my aunt. My uncle was like, "She's my daughter. What do you want?" He's like, "I don't know her. Who is she?" So the soldier came, to me, and he was asking me who I was. I didn't answer. I stood there frozen. Then he slapped me like 3 times, and I started to bleed from my ears. But I didn't answer then. The civilian guy, he was like, why are you bothering yourself with that? We're gonna come back for them anyways. So he looked around, he went in the house, and he didn't find anybody else that they didn't know except me, and they walked away. That was Monday. On Tuesday, there was a heavy battle at the Rebero Mountain between RPF and government soldiers, the government army. And because of that, the militia stopped killing. Usually they had it was like a job. They would get up in the morning, like around 7, 8, they'll start kill in the families. Around 11 a.m., they'll stop killing, they'll start stealing, and they'll go home with that. 2 p.m., you hear them coming up again, going to kill. Around 4:30, they also kind of stop killing and start to steal whatever they get from the houses of people they killed. How we would know that? They'll be passing, outside of the fence, and they will hear their conversation. That's how we will know people they killed and how they killed them. But on that Tuesday, they all ran. They had to stop and ran out of the houses they were killing, where they're killing people, because the artillery was so heavy for everybody to be scared. So we all got out. We were standing outside to see what was going on. And on Wednesday, it was April 13th. That's when RPF soldiers, they came into our neighborhood to rescue one family, because there was one guy there, he had his aunt's house in our neighborhood. So he called them, because at that time the phone, house phone was still working. So he came to, he called them. He's like, "Are you still there? Are you guys still alive?" They were like, "Yes, we are." So he came to rescue them. But when he got there, they told him that there were 2 other families. If they leave and leave them behind, they're gonna get killed. So that's how we got rescued from our neighborhood, taken to Rebero. From there, we were safe from machetes and everything, but we had to now take on a task of helping people who survived from Nyanza. That's when, because the killings from Nyanza had taken place on 11th. That was Monday. Now we are Thursday, the 14th. So that's to bring them, and we will just help them as much as we can. I was there, I think, 4 or 5 days, or 4 days. It was 18th April. That's when I was shot by a bomb fragment, and I remained there for 2 days, and they moved me from Rebero to Gishushu. I cannot tell when I got to Gishushu. I lost track of time. I couldn't tell when it was time, what time it was, day or night. Then I don't know how many days I was there, because I was wounded, and I wasn't able to do anything for myself. When the time came, they were able to moved me from places to places, and then from Gishushu we went to Byumba, where I was able to get treated, and I returned to Kigali after 4th July. That's all I can say now.
Thank you very much. And I can't imagine how difficult it must be to share these memories, and I think it's difficult for us to hear the stories, but your sharing of that level of detail is so important for us to remember that, the snippets that for those in the United States may have seen on the news or elsewhere, that there were whole lives being led into the depths of emotion, and that we try to put ourselves in your shoes and understand. We're just so glad that you're here with us, and thank you for sharing, so courageously with us. And on the topic of sharing, for the sake of time, I want to jump ahead a little bit to ask you. We are here, we are commemorating this event, the Kwibuka. Tell us a little bit about why is it so important to tell these stories. Yvonne, you were sharing something with me before. I think was really powerful. You were talking about your son, and your son asked you a question of, Mom, these are really. It's so hard to talk about these things. Why do you do this? Why should we, have these commemorations? And you had a really profound answer. So maybe, would you mind sharing why is it so important for all of us to be here today, commemorating and remembering such an unthinkable tragedy? Why is it so important for us to do that?
If we don't remember, then the genocide against the Tutsi will be forgotten. And when that happens, the deniers will have now a platform to talk. But why can't we allow that to happen? It's because the Tutsi who were killed during the genocide, they had one crime, being Tutsis, being born Tutsi, nothing else. There was nothing else that they had done. And Emmanuel said it very beautifully. It's our moral responsibility to keep that. We need to keep that torch always lit, because if we forget and don't remember, then we are glorifying the genocide perpetrators' behavior and actions. We are giving them a pass. We are not condoning what they did, but we are allowing them to feel good about what they did and feel right, but they were not right. There was never a reason for them to kill another human being, for them being human beings. And for Tutsis, when we remember, it's a reminder that we are alive, despite the pain, despite the sorrow, despite visible and invisible wounds, we are alive and stronger. But because we are stronger, it doesn't mean that sometimes we are weak. Because, like Alice mentioned, she lost her mom and her brother. She doesn't even know how they died. I'm not gonna speak for her, but I'm sure whenever she thinks about them, she struggles to find even the last memories of them she has. If you're here, you are a parent, you are a sibling, you are a child. Try to imagine if you cannot even remember the memory of your loved ones. How would that feel? Ask yourself, how would that feel about it? Will I be able to move on? But here we are, us sitting here and others sitting there, genocide survivors, we moved on. It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy, but we had to, because there were two things to do at the time after the genocide. We either had to live or we had to die. I might not speak for everyone, but I'm sure they will agree with me. We chose one thing, life. We chose to live. But living was not easy, because we had to overcome the pain, tears, sleepless nights. We had to overcome the trauma, PTSD, anxiety. We had to learn and understand how to live without support, without affection, without care, without guidance. So it is important to remember. Kwibuka, meaning remember, it is important because that's how we survive, that's how we keep living, that's how we keep going. And that's how we remind the perpetrators that they were not successful and never will.
If I can add, so to retaliate what Yvonne just said, to answer your question, to remember Kwibuka is very, very important because the genocide happened and a lot of us was living in the survival mode. But then when the genocide stopped, when you're not living in that survival mode, that's when the reality hits. Okay, so now you're an orphan. Now you have lost your loved one. Now what? How do you move on? How do you... So a lot of us did not even have, did not bury our loved one. I didn't confine their bodies. So we never had closure, So when we do this remembrance, this Kwibuka, it's a way of us to cope and to heal and to keep their memory alive, to just put value on their lives, that their lives were not in vain. Even though we didn't bury them, even though we didn't find their bodies, but we still remember. No matter how long it will pass, it's been 30 years, but some of us, the wound is still there. So this commemoration, this remembering, it's not just even for us, it's the next generation, to show them that this is what happened. And also, as Emmanuel said earlier, there's so many deniers that the genocide happened. And they're come in a different shape and form. Some of them said, oh, Rwandan genocide. By the way, it's not Rwandan genocide, it's the genocide against the Tutsi, because the Tutsi were the one being hunted. So it's not the Rwandan. So the commemoration, their death, it's a proof, it's a sign that actually this genocide was against the Tutsi. So we remember for us to remember, to cope, to heal, to have some closure the best way we can, even though we can't, but also to take a stand against those deniers who said there was a double genocide and there was, that did not happen. It was a genocide against. So the Kwibuka will always remember to keep their memory alive. We also always remember to teach our kids and the next generation, the generation after that, that this happened. And the more we talked about it, they know, like Manu said, this did not start just in 1994. It started way back in 50s and continued 60s and 90s. So it's something that was, if we allow this denial to continue, it will corrupt the mind of a young generation. They won't even remember this. So that's the reason why we have to remember. It's very, very important to us, especially as survivors.
Thank you very much. And thank you for allowing us to be here with you today. Yes, please. Thank you for allowing us to be here to honor you all and to honor your loved ones as we remember with you. We're running a little bit short on time, but I have a couple last questions for you. One is, you have this audience here. We have educators here today. We have some young people here today. We've heard your stories. We've heard some of the words that you want to share with us. What would you want to leave us with? We talked a little bit in the beginning about action, that it's not just enough to have awareness, but that awareness needs to translate into some sort of action in our lives, right? What would you want to leave us with as we go out into the world?
For me, what I would say is that our past does not define us. So if you see us here, and more of us and people who attended our event last weekend, you saw how many people was there and people were able to share their testimonies. So it's resilient. It's not easy to sit here and relieve, because honestly, when you're talking about it, it's kind of like takes you back, like Yvonne was saying, PTSD. So, and also we come from a culture where mental health was not, I wouldn't say supported, but it was not there's a stigma about that. But I'm hoping that we're evolving away from that. So what I would tell the audience is that just by being here, you're supporting us. Okay, just by letting us your voice, you're helping us. And also, we want you to help us fight these deniers. You don't have to stand in the street and have a sign, but we know that some of them come to, like Manu was saying, come to the school and institution like this or somewhere, and then they give them platform. Please, if you hear anybody or if you see anybody talking, so do your homework, figure out who they are. Is this story really the truth? So that's how we want you guys to support us, to be there for us. And if you know any survivors, like Brad was saying, just check on them, Are you doing okay? What can I do? Sometimes you don't need to do much. It's just to talk, ear to listen, and, that's it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Yvonne?
What I would say is, first of all, thanks for being here. I would say that take what you heard from the video, from Emmanuel, from us, and go and do more research so that you can be able to have more facts to your belt that you can be able to use when you have to advocate against genocide, against the genocide, in particular 1994, genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. Because I'm not going to repeat what Alice said. She said it beautifully. It's not Rwandan genocide. It's a genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. And I'm going to also say that in the aspect of awareness and advocacy, please, if you hear somebody saying that there was no genocide in Rwanda, you can ask the professors, the educators, you can reach out to Dallas Holocaust Museum. They will let us know. If necessary, we will come, we will help you to raise that awareness, to explain it, to provide factual, information. Because if you cannot learn from the past, from your history, there's no reason what happened won't repeat it again. We commemorate so that people know, people understand, people are aware. Because we don't want to have another genocide in our country. But we will also be happy not to see another genocide anywhere else. When they said never again, I would say that until today has been words. Maybe we can make it more than words. To live as a survivor is finding yourself on a daily basis. It's trying to understand who you are on a daily basis. It's not easy. So to prevent another person to live like, trying to find yourself, trying to understand yourself on a daily basis, let's just work together and prevent genocide happening by speaking, being upstanders, not bystanders, being advocates, being ambassadors. Let's not leave it to the professors of human rights only or educators from Dallas Holocaust Museum. Let's understand that hate cannot only result in something other than, it can result only in things like genocide. So to choose different, you gotta have to understand the consequences that can come from that. For us, it was a genocide against the Tutsi. So ask yourself, for you, what that might be, or what can that be, or how that might look like.
Thank you. Well, I wish we could sit here all afternoon, but I have one last quick question for you to leave us on a note. I'm curious, I've been so touched just to be able to spend this time with you all. What's something that's bringing you hope and joy right now?
Me personally, like I mentioned earlier, I have a daughter. So when I see my daughter, she brings me hope. Because even though she will never get to know her grandma or her aunt, but I see so much of my mom in her. She's very feisty, which that's how my mom was. So that gives me hope. And also there is a say, when they say they tried to bury us, but they didn't know we're seeds. So we're a seed, we're multiplying. We have created families, we have friends, we've expanded, so that gives me hope. And especially to know that the young generation are so involved in this. Like my daughter was part of a ceremony last weekend, and she was giving me feedback. Oh, it's so long, but you know, if you can do X, Y, Z. So the fact that she's so involved, that gives me hope that this, we're not doing, like I say, we're not doing this for us, we're doing it for the next generation. So they will carry the torch to remember our loved one even years after that, you know. And they will be able to reach people that we could not reach. So that gives me hope that the next generation is more involved to know what happened and to advocate it.
What gives me hope is the fact that we are still able to speak, to communicate, but more importantly, to see that the resilience has bear fruit. And not to repeat what she mentioned, but having our kids being interested in understanding what genocide is, what it was, what it meant, what it means for the future. It's important because most of us today, you will find us, most of us that you will find involved in commemoration, we were probably between 10 and 15 during the genocide. Today, most of us are parents. That means we are preparing for tomorrow. So being able to do that and having younger people being involved, to me, I'm like, we are doing the right thing. We are on the right path. Having our kids being there, having every, survivors, even non-survivors, Rwandans being there, and their children being there, wanting to understand. To me, that is important. That is in diaspora. That's here in Texas or in anywhere else outside of the country. But when I was watching the ceremony back home to see how young people were involved in the 30th commemoration back home, I was like, yes, we are doing the right thing. Not only genocide survivors, but the country is doing the right thing. So we are making sure the genocide against the Tutsi not only doesn't get forgotten, but also younger people understand that that cannot ever happen again. To me, that's hope.
We appreciate you leaving us with these notes of hopefulness and remembering that there is good in this world and that it's worth fighting for. And so I believe we're going to be turning over to Mary Pat, but I just want to say a couple of quick things in closing from me. First of all, thank you to the audience. Thank you for being so receptive and respectful for this conversation today. Another big thank you to the Dallas Holocaust and Human Rights Museum. We in the SMU Human Rights Program have been very blessed to call you all a partner. Mary Pat and her team do incredible work hosting events like this all the time, and this city needs that. And then finally, a thank you to Yvonne and Alice. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your goodness. And just thank you for your time and being with us today. I have been blessed to spend this time on the stage with you, and I hope that our paths will continue to cross far into the future.
Brad, I echo everything you said. Alice and Yvonne, thank you so much for your courage and your strength. You're an inspiration to us. Brad, thank you for your kindness and just your wonderful heart. Emmanuel, thank you for always being a friend at the museum and for helping us share the story of the genocide against the Tutsis. Genocide is part of our human rights wing in the permanent exhibition on the 3rd floor. We have a 10 Stages of Genocide gallery where we teach about the process, and through that we know that the final stage of genocide is always denial. You all have spoken about that. It happens with every genocide. And we are doing our part to make sure that North Texas knows about the genocide against the Tutsis. It's part of that exhibition. And I hope all of you here today will help bear the witness these two extraordinary women have shared with us. Go out and tell others and encourage them to come and learn the history here. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.